it's 5:59, so we have a minute or two.
Arlene, I'll say that I like your I love your accent.
What accent? What accent? I don't have the accent. You guys have the accent.
We've got some friends from the Jersey area down in the Florida Keys, and I can sit and listen to them just jibber jabber, and it's so entertaining for me.
Oh, Alderman Campbell is with us too. Welcome.
How you doing, Chairman? Good to see you tonight.
Thanks for changing the time, by the way, for the
Oh, yes, ma'am.
projects. Oh, there's
problem.
Paul. We just saw your name. We didn't see your face before, Paul. It looks like Daryl is joining us.
I was having to chase the cat off the screen. That's why I wasn't on.
I don't see Daryl's.
I'll mute myself while you have your meeting.
Daryl's on there, but his video's not playing.
Hi, Rod. Hi, Alderman Robertson. Okay, are we ready? Daryl, are you ready? Oh, and the mayor has joined us too. Okay.
You are live.
All right, Daryl, are you ready? Because I don't see his face. Okay, well, I'm going to call the the meeting to order. Let it be noted that all the committee members are here. We have several different guests here that are joining us, including the mayor. The first item on the agenda is to accept the agenda. Do I hear a motion to accept the agenda as written?
So moved.
Okay. I'll second that. We have to do a roll call for the accepting the agenda. Alderman Waters? You're on mute.
Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, aye.
Okay. Alderman Woodcock?
Aye.
And I say aye. So the agenda has been accepted unanimously. The first item on the agenda, the mayor is on the agenda. Mayor, would you like to, okay, there he is. Mayor, would you like to say anything on the finance?
You guys have a tight time frame. I'll be quiet.
Okay. All righty. And the first item on the agenda is to review our February 25th, 2020 Finance Committee meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay. I'll second that. Okay, Daryl second that. And roll call, Alderman Waters, do we accept the minutes of the February 20th Finance
Aye.
Committee meeting? And
Aye.
Alderman Woodcock?
Aye.
And I say, and the chairman says aye. Okay, that has been accepted unanimously. Review of the April 21st, 2020 special call Finance Committee meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Alderman Waters, do you accept that?
Aye.
The minutes? Okay. Alderman Woodcock?
Aye.
And I say aye. The chairman says aye. Okay. Under ordinances, we have ordinance 2020 without a number, ordinance amending the personnel rules regarding educational attainment pay. Did we get a number for that yet, Robert? Robert?
Yes, ma'am, we sure did.
Okay.
Give me one moment. I will tell you.
It's either 12 or 13, Robert.
It's ordinance 2020-12.
Okay.
See.
I'll jump in, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but a couple of quick things over both of these policies. Just kind of give you guys have you guys seen the ordinances that came out today?
I have one that came out a couple days ago.
Okay, the ones that I received today, they have some concerns of mine that I've not had a chance to talk to Mr. Lamar about. That's why I was wondering which ones you were looking at, if any at all. I'll give you guys the Cliff Notes version of both of these, as I don't know how deep in the weeds you really want to get. I don't want to bore you, but I certainly think that you guys need to know enough to be able to wrap your head around some of these issues. If you attended the meeting that we had, I think it was a special call general committee meeting back in late February, where there was no voting or anything. We strictly just talked about some rule changes. These were brought up at the time. From my understanding, these were also approved at the general committee level and the March the 10th meeting, which was a while ago, but that was the last meeting we had ultimately. So here we are. This is in an effort to keep things moving in a positive direction. The educational attainment pay, I will give you guys I'd happily send you the version that we're operating off of now, which is basically written on all but a typewriter. A couple things that this new proposal allows, and I'll just make it really simple. What kind of sparked this recently was basically right now we allow employees to get educational attainment pay once they come off of probation. Well, the employee has to initiate that right now. And as you can imagine, employees come off probation either 6 months or in police's case, a year after they've started. And a lot of times they've either forgotten the policy or they didn't know it was their responsibility. And I think Assistant Chief Jones, we just had an employee started back in 2012 that just realized that he was owed education attainment pay. It is the employee's responsibility. However, my point is that kind of got us talking about, I think it's completely unnecessary to wait until these people get off probation to give them education pay. In my opinion, it's silly. And Shelley, you've been dealing with these rules for 30 something years. So feel free to chime in as well. But basically, if an employee has a bachelor's, if a police officer or firefighter has a bachelor's degree, we're going to utilize that bachelor's degree on day one. I don't understand why they get compensated for it 6 months or a year later. Why not pay them for it day one? Cut out some of the clerical issues and Miss Billy or Miss Vicky having to have tickler files all over the place for some of these new employees. That's a big step towards simplification. The other issue we've got majorly with I'll say majorly, we've got at least about 14 employees, most of which in the police and fire. So a little bit of history on this. Back in about back in the summer of 2018, during the pay study, Mr. Voss kind of addressed some issues that employees had let him know that over the years, they had lost money as it related to their promotions. City policy says you get 7.5%. However, the e-pay policy came into play, and I'm sure some of you long timers could probably chime in much better than I could about this.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, can
Yes.
we take this? Can we take this first one first and discuss it and debate it before we go to the second one he's talking about right now? I think he's talking about another one. Let's go ahead and talk about 2012.
We're talking about the educational, right, Chris?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you skip on to the next one?
No,
Yeah, he moved. I'm sorry, did you not move on to personal rules regarding promotions?
not yet.
Oh,
They
I'm sorry.
they very much intertwine, but not yet.
I heard the word. That's the reason I jumped in. Excuse me, madam.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so the employees were promoted at one time. They did not achieve that 7.5%. So about a year and a half or almost 2 years ago, we went back and made them whole, if you will. My understanding is at that time, we gave them an additional 2.5% on their pay. But looking back, we basically did that by giving them extra e-pay. Now, again, this is going to be very difficult for some of the users that aren't involved in our day-to-day decision-making and rule evaluating. So I apologize for hitting this at the 30,000-foot level. But at the end of the day, right now we have at least 14 people that we've diagnosed that have incorrect e-pays. I think what our proposal is moving forward is basically we get their education attainment pay back to what actually reflects the education. And then if that's going to involve us removing education pay from somebody, we turn around and give that back to them as a merit increase to make them whole. So at the end of the day, I want to be very clear on this. If you don't hear anything else, hear that I'm not proposing to take any money away from anybody at the end of the day. It's that simple.
Okay, Chris, I had this brief conversation with Robert about this yesterday. And my question was, have we run this by MTS? And what was their, did we get their blessing on all of this? Is this the normal way to do business? Or is this normal for, cities like us to do it like this?
We have. We have now, and we have before, certainly consulted them, and I can assure you this has been researched thoroughly by multiple individuals, but in after our conversation, once again, reached out to not just Mr. Jacob, but Peter as well, and spoke to both of them, and they have read these before that time, as I've found out recently, but just had a secondary conversation with them about it, and even kind of posed or had a conversation with Peter a little bit about how much involvement he had actually in some of the drafting of these and conversations leading up to. So they have, and this is commonplace.
Okay, my second question is, where are the, which employees are impacted by this the most is, and I'm assuming it's police and fire. So I want to hear from the chiefs from them too.
Yeah, out of the 14 we've diagnosed thus far, it is all police and fire, higher level people that were promoted at one point in the past 10 or 15 years. Those are the people that really are affected, that were diagnosed right now.
Well, I'd like to hear from both chiefs.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The only comments I've had, I've talked to Chris about this several times. Back to the very beginning part of this about new employees getting it. I certainly agree with that, but I would like to maybe ask for Chris to reconsider and do a caveat of they must graduate the academy. If we got somebody new that comes through the door that has a bachelor's degree and we start paying them bachelor's pay and then they get over there and they fail out of the academy, I think we're paying them extra and we're not certain that they're going to stay or last through the academy. Our academy's 10 weeks, so we're only asking them 2.5 months to not retain that education pay. I mean, again, I'm either way. My only concern is we're paying those folks extra money and they may not cut the mustard at the academy is my only concern.
Okay, Chief Jones.
And that's part one, and then I'll talk about the rest of it when it's my turn again.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Chief Bush. I mean, go ahead and finish what you're saying.
And then the only thing, like I said, Chris and I have talked about this education thing. If we're making them whole again, the only issue that I see with that, and I mean, Chris, I don't want you to feel like I'm blindsiding you, but thinking about it too, is we're pushing people closer to being topped out. And that could be an issue. So I guess if we're supposed to do it with new hires moving forward, it'd probably be a great opportunity. I don't know. I don't think I have very many people that are close to being topped out in the fire department. Maybe Chris could share those names with me at some point. We haven't gotten that far in discussions, but I certainly see what Chris is trying to do, and I understand it 100%. But again, my only concern would be somebody that's close to being topped out. If we take it away, the education pay, and then we give it back to them in a step, we're simply moving them closer to being topped out. But it's still, he's not taking money away from them. He's just pushing them closer to being topped out. So he's correct in his comments as far as that goes.
Well, and I certainly agree with Chief Bush, and that's certainly been the topic of discussion at this point. And I'll let Chief Jones go in just a second. My rebuttal or maybe addition to add to what Chief was saying is right now, if we have an employee that's getting an E2 or an E3, and they really only need to be getting E1, eventually there's going to be a career earning potential issue. These people that basically are once they're topped out right now, they're getting 2 steps or 3 steps, depending on what kind of e-pay they get, well above the max at this point. So I certainly think that that's reasonable to point out. Let me also add that I didn't cause these issues. I'm simply trying to kind of get some things more consistent. At this point, you talk about promotions and demotions. You're about to find out why this is important when it comes to people getting promoted or demoted, is because when e-pay is just arbitrary, it's very difficult on everybody to come up with an accurate pay increase or pay decrease for a demotion. So I do think that's relevant to point out. I certainly understand what Chief's coming from, because it is arbitrarily moving someone closer to being maxed out. But right now, if they have an incorrect or higher e-pay designation, they now have more career earning potential than another individual that with the same education and the same job class as that individual, if that makes sense. So we have an earning potential problem as well that we can't look away from. as well. So anyways, Chief Jones, if you got anything to add as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Chief Bush about not paying at least till they graduate from the academy. But part of our issue is Toledo is so backed up trying to get recruits in there that for us, it may not, there is the academy's 12 weeks, but it could be anywhere from 6 months to 9 months. We have a year by state statute to get them through the academy. So for us, and we try to get, once we get them on board and get them through the in-house recruit academy in 10 or 12 weeks, to get them in the academy at the soonest possible date. If an academy date opens close to while they are getting close to completing the in-house, and it looks like they're going to do that, we'll actually suspend the in-house, the remainder of it, to get them through the state academy. But we don't ever know for sure. So for us, it's not as easy as saying, it's just going to be the first 2 months before they graduate the academy. But I do agree with what Chief Bush said of getting them through the academy before they get that. The second part of that is, Chris and I have had several conversations about it. I think the last one we kind of agreed to disagree on some of the specifics of that new policy, particularly the first draft of the ordinance that I saw did not really spell out that current employees would not be adversely affected by that. The part that stood out to me is where it said, this will take effect on the soonest pay period possible after approval and passing. So that caused me a little bit of concern with that. My suggestion had been, I understand some of the issues Chris is seeing with the e-pay, but my suggestion had been to treat e-pay very simply like EMT pay or paramedic pay, or it's an additional pay that's not part of your base pay. Your base pay is one thing. If you get promoted, you get promoted, but your e-pay is a separate bonus pay.
I think Alderman Woodcock has his hand raised.
Alderman Woodcock?
Are they done? I don't want to jump in the middle
No,
of the discussion.
Okay. Are the two chiefs done?
I'm good for now. Yeah.
Alderman Woodcock?
Thank you. So let's back up. So you said this passed, I'm sorry, Chris, you said this passed general back in February, March, right?
March the 10th. I was not at that meeting, but my understanding is they blessed it at that point, which is why it's here.
And we're looking at the exact same ordinance that was voted on almost 2 months ago.
That's correct. To my knowledge, it has not been changed.
Out of curiosity, why does it still not have an ordinance number? It's been 2 months.
I received one middle of this afternoon, but there's been quite a bit of consternation about the language in it, what needs to go in it.
Mr. Woodcock, can I answer your question?
I would love it.
It was not before the committee. It was prepared in the last 2 days.
Okay.
The idea was before the committee. The ordinance was not. This ordinance has just been prepared. There've been several drafts of it today. One of the things I like to point out, I don't know if you got the latest draft today, members of the committee, but Mr. Lamar and I had talked about this, and just to allay the fears of current employees, I put the last paragraph says, this ordinance shall take effect for new employees after June 1st, 2020. That way, none of our current employees can be adversely affected. We've been through this issue for the last umpteen years dealing with it. And 2 years ago, we spent hours and hours on it. And we don't want to undo what we accomplished then. And I understand what Mr. Taylor's trying to do. And it makes sense in the future, as Chief Jones said. But what this ordinance says written now would only apply for new employees. We would not be going back and trying to take anything away from our current employees.
Has the sponsor approved that change? Because that was not the intent originally.
Who is the sponsor?
I haven't heard of a sponsor.
Scott Sprouse has agreed to sponsor all 5 of these. So Mr. Woodcock, that is correct. When I said the ordinance, the policy draft was finished. That went to general committee a month and a half, almost 2 months ago. The ordinances, I didn't see the ordinances till today.
Right.
And Mr. Sprouse has asked that these ordinances also go to the general committee in 2 weeks.
That was about to be my next comment. Okay, thank you, John. That helps tremendously.
And John, just to add to that, I'd like to see MTS's review of it as well.
That would be great. I've not talked to anyone with MTS about it.
Yeah, I'm not a personnel guru or anything like that. I'd really like their blessing on it because it seems like it's going to be a pretty good change, probably for the better. But, but I don't know. I'm not a personnel
And I don't necessarily.
expert.
Can I go?
Go ahead,
Go
Darrell.
ahead, Daryl.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding the concerns of Jim and Scotty. So if we are in the understanding that no current employee is going to be impacted by this, only future employees, are you two okay with this?
Jim?
I would need to probably do some more review on it. For the most part, probably. But I do still have some questions for, depending on what degree a new employee has when they start and what degrees they may earn while they're here. I'm just wondering how that's going to play in. I get the part about giving them their e-pay from day one, and that's fine maybe if somebody comes in here as a beginning employee. And this, the one thing to keep in mind is this is all across the city, not just police and fire, but they may come in here with maybe an associate's and later on they earn a bachelor's and master's, or they may come in here with a master's. And that's, I'm not quite sure I understand all the intricacies of as they get promoted, how that's going to impact them, because one of the concerns I had is the reality is once you start getting promoted, and we would hope that any city employee that came here had a desire to be promoted at some point and would work toward that goal. When they get to that point that they get a 7.5% promotion and then they lose part of their e-pay, then we're back in the same situation where they maybe only receive 5% for their promotion as opposed to the full 7.5%. And that was the issue from the get-go.
Scotty?
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, moving forward, new employees, if it's a policy that we put into place that affects new employees, I've told Chris from day one, I'm on board with this 100%. I mean, there's a lot of things that probably could be hashed out that we haven't changed in up 10 years, like Chris is saying. If it's for a new employee, I can support it 100% because it's something we tell them when we hire them. This is how it is. This is how it's going to be. If you're still on 18 steps, you're going to get topped out in 18 steps, regardless of what your rank is. But you're going to get that money as soon as you walk through the door. So if you come in at a master's degree level, you're going to get 7.5%. And it's that simple. So that means you get 3 or 2 more bumps. We don't require an associate until we get division chiefs in our department. So obviously they would get 7.5% right out of the chute. And then as they promote it up, it would move them up, but it would move them closer to their being topped out. If they knew that on the front end, I don't see it as an issue. And that's just my personal opinion. But I think if we leave things alone the way they are right now for our staff, even though we are not making any changes financially, I certainly understand what Chris is saying. I think we're moving people closer to retirement. And I don't know what that means for me. I don't know if the 14 and if I've got 8 of them and PD's got 6. I don't know that, but I think that would be worthy of saying, hey, we're moving you a step closer. But I do strongly on the first part of that of saying, I would like to see folks get that education pay after they graduate the academy after 10 weeks. And that's simply on us as department heads to make sure we process that paperwork. I certainly understand what Chris is trying to do for HR. He's trying to lighten the load on them for they don't have to keep dunning everybody to remember to do their paperwork. And overall, we all have to do better with keeping up with our own people. It's our responsibility and not HR's.
Dave?
Yes, Chairman Cunningham, I appreciate that. A couple of comments. One of them, let me make sure that since I've come back in December, that the police and the fire and the public safety are on a different payroll than the rest of the city employees. Is that correct, Robert?
Different pay schedule. They're on a 28-day schedule versus ours. But well, yeah, excuse me. But they're not on a different pay, as in they get paid the same day, but it's just a different schedule.
different work cycle for FLSA.
I think what Dave's asking, Dave, you correct me if I'm wrong. You're asking, are we on a separate pay scale?
Like a grading scale? Yes. Yes.
That is correct. Yes, we are.
Okay, that's what I was assuming, okay? So here's my comment. I've been listening to this for a couple of weeks, haven't said much of anything. If y'all on a different pay scale and y'all two don't agree with it because of training and going to the academy and things like that, why don't we just leave you guys alone and let the rest of the city employees pick up this education attainment pay, because it's a problem. What I see is, and even the few months I've been back, is that somebody comes in and they only supposed to have a bachelor's degree or high school degree, and they have a bachelor's, and they get E1 pay. And then they get promoted, and the minimum requirements is a bachelor's degree, and they still get E1 pay. That's wrong. That's dead wrong, okay? Bachelor's degree is required for their promotion, but they still continue to get the E1. I know exactly where Chris is going with this, and I agree with him 100%. And we need to go back to the basics and see where we're going with this. I'm really frustrated that we have thrown this thing into a tizzy just because some people are in the wrong scale and have been in there for years and are getting paid too much. They're getting too much e-pay for what they're supposed to be after their promotions. And I'm completely against what you guys are trying to do and throw this thing into a tizzy. I know I'm frustrated, and you can hear it in my voice, but he's exactly right. And these people are in the wrong spot. We need to get moving forward. As far as June 1, that's great. Everybody's not going to lose any money. Chief Jones, you're not going to lose any money. Okay. I've heard numerous people say Chief Jones is going to lose money. Chief Jones is not going to lose money. He's going to stay at the same pay, the same E rating and everything. But moving forward, when somebody gets promoted and their minimum requirements are a bachelor's and they've got e-pay for a high school degree, they come off of that E1 pay and just get that straight salary. Okay?
I got a question.
Daryl?
If I could speak up just one, let me say one thing real quick. While we sort of call it Schedule A and Schedule B, all city employees are under the same personnel rules and the same pay ordinance. So that's what we're talking about here. We would have to change all of that if we broke them out separately. So that's just for what it's worth. I guess we could do that, but we've resisted that since the beginning of the city.
But they're not broken out separately now?
They're on a separate scale. They are on a separate scale. The scale approved has been broken out.
First clarification, who was throwing us in a tizzy?
Some of the police officers that have been promoted that just require a high school degree, and when they were hired, now they were promoted to a lieutenant or captain or colonel or whatever. Their minimum requirements for that job was a college degree, okay, which they should not get the e-pay after that, but they continued to get the e-pay once they were promoted. So they got their promotion and they still continue to get the e-pay, which was minimum requirements.
Okay. And I thought, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought we kind of came to a great compromise. We were going to just do this for new employees and leave all these current officers you're talking about alone.
Yeah,
so are you suggesting we go back and correct their pay?
No. For the ones that have been incorrectly done, when Ms. Palmer was here and some of the former people, and I was one of those people that were here then, when they were done then and incorrectly, we're going to leave those people alone. Whether it's John Doe or Chief so-and-so or Lieutenant so-and-so, if they're getting the e-pay, we're going to leave their pay alone and move on.
I was going to make the suggestion that we allow HR and HPD and the fire department to get together and put in the verbiage they want as far as when they get out of academy, however they want it. And they don't necessarily have to come back to finance for a vote. They can make those changes before the general committee meeting and vote on a final piece, not this, kind of not halfway done, but I mean, it's been thrown together in the last few hours and weeks. And there's obviously still some things the fire department and the police officers would like in there to protect their current employees. So that seems like an easy compromise to me. So that would be my suggestion is let's go ahead and not vote, let you guys come together and put in what you need to put in and be done with it.
I'll say, and I appreciate that, Mr. Woodcock. I don't think the new employees are the big point of contention or confusion with any of this. I think it's more related to just the higher level police and fire people that would be affected by this whole e-pay removal situation. I think we all agree that new hires, like we can tweak that, no problem. But I think more of a controversial topic is going to be the education pay and how we deal with that. What I would like to remind you guys of is I'm kind of up against history at this point here. It's been said several times that everybody kind of agrees with what we're doing, but then we're going to turn around and just kind of grandfather it all in.
Oh, okay. So that gets us back to the original point. So we are going to impact current employees.
My proposal would be to address the at least 14 issues that we've diagnosed. Again, not taking money from them. And again, there's just a difference of opinion. Chief Jones said it best. We kind of agreed to disagree when we had a long conversation with his office that day. I think if we just look the other way and grandfather those people in and just roll on, I think we're doing a disservice to this organization. I think we're still refusing to address the fact that we have career earning potential problems. We have employees that have the exact same job, the exact same education level, and employee A has an incorrect e-pay that will allow him to make more money than employee B. We have that problem right now in this city, and we are refusing to address it because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So I guess I do somewhat want to move on. I think we could talk for hours about this. I think everybody would agree with some of the statements, and I certainly think it's healthy discussion. I just knew e-pay, I've always said e-pay is going to bring this city to its knees. If anything will ever bring it to its knees, e-pay for some reason.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Alderman Waters.
Couple of questions. Chris, who's winning that ball game there behind you?
So I can turn that off.
I can't concentrate on you by watching that. I'm just kidding you. Chief Bush, you mentioned top out. How many employees do you have if this was to go through with top out right now?
As far as my command staff, and again, I don't know the particular names. Chris hadn't shared that with me. Most of my command staff would be the ones, I may have a captain or two that's been here 34, 33, 32 years that are close to topping anyway. And there's a couple other folks that are probably in their firefighter roles. I don't want to get.
Pardon me?
I think you just.
I may have a couple of senior firemen that are close to being topped out. Now, whether the education pay affects them, and that was before my time, so I didn't have any control over that. To me, if you get demoted for whatever action, whatever the problem is, that certainly should be part of your punishment, is losing your pay. And I know that sounds harsh, but if you're harsh enough to get demoted, you got to have something to go along with it other than just saying, okay, we're not going to hurt your feelings too bad. We're going to hurt you, and we're going to take your title away from you. Because I'm looking at that now with a couple of my folks, and there's nothing I can do to fix that because they were demoted and then they got promoted again, and now they're making just about as much money as a low-end captain.
I agree.
So I think that's part of what Chris is trying to fix.
Madam Chairman, I'll have to concur with Alderman Woodcock on, let's just defer this, move it up. And let these two,
I'm not ready to vote on this.
well, I'm not asking, I'm just saying how I feel. I agree with what he said. I think the two chiefs, maybe MTAS might ought to get involved in this. And I'm like you, Madam Chairman, I'm not in personnel either. So, but we'll move on. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to do what's fair and equitable for all employees, not for a few.
That is certainly the direction that I'm trying to go in this. Unfortunately, there's, again, I'm up against history at this point. I'm up against things that were done a long time ago. But I can't look away from some of these. I would love to just move on. And I certainly am ready to move on here in just a moment. But
I do have one more question before we end on this.
Yeah, go ahead, Alderman Woodcock.
So the employees that are being paid that is causing the tizzy, were they incorrectly paid? Did they find a loophole, or were we following our personnel rules and they got paid based on the personnel rules that are on the books?
If I may answer that, I would think it's in an inequality across the board sort of standpoint, from not just police and fire, but if I have an accounting tech who comes in with an accounting degree, but my accountants are required, and I decide to promote that individual, well, one accountant that I hired in at the accountancy level does not get e-pay, but the promoted accountant tech now does.
I get that.
That imbalance.
I get
I
that.
get that. Well, here's what I'm trying, if I'm gonna be forced to vote on this and we're trying to impact current employees, I want to know if we just decided we didn't like the current rules and so we're trying to backdate it. Or did these employees find a loophole that they took advantage of? Because it's gonna be really, really hard for me to look at a policeman or a fireman in the eye and say, hey, I know these were the rules last year,
Mhm.
but we decided we don't like those anymore. So therefore you're gonna lose your pay. If that's the situation, I'm never going to vote for that. However, if this was a loophole that they were taking advantage of, then I want to know that. And then that's understandable that we need to fix that for current employees. But based on all the conversations I'm hearing, I still don't understand if we're voting on current employees or not. At first, I thought that was removed, but then it sounded like it's not. And then it sounds like this is really just some employees not wanting to lose their unfair pay, but at the same time, if it was the rules, how's that unfair? I don't understand all these situations.
You know, if that's the way you want to look at it, I would say that possibly, yeah, it's a loophole. But then alternatively, I don't know why we consult other cities whenever we want to make a decision in Hendersonville. If what we're going to say is, well, they took advantage of a loophole, we'll just give it to them. I can't change that. But then we look at another city and we see that they're doing the opposite of what we're doing, then why are we doing those two things? I mean, we're not going to take their word. We're not going to backdate this to see that they've always been doing it that way. They've always been doing it in a fair and equitable way. But we see that and we say, no, we're not going to do that anyways, though. We're not going to change anything. We're just going to fix everything going forward. You know, they're kind of two conflicting ideals, I think.
So it really will have an effect on current employees. I mean, we're not going to take pay away from current employees, but if that current employee is getting e-pay and then promoted to a new position that requires a bachelor's degree, for instance, that e-pay goes away. Is that right?
That's how it should be done. That's not how historically it has been done, at least in certain instances, from my understanding, by some of my predecessors. Again, I'm up against history here. At some point, I certainly understand Mr. Woodcock. I think it's a little bit of an interpretation issue that we've just kind of all kind of disagreed about over the years, from my understanding and conversations with the police and fire chief. I certainly can't fix that. But what we can do is kind of address some reasonable language that we can all agree on to guide us moving forward. Again, I'm going to go back to, I certainly understand this whole grandfathering in situation, but I'm also not a big advocate of having a different set of rule books for all current employees. I don't want to operate on two rule books. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's silly because we have a ton of rules that we're going to start addressing. And I think having two rule books, because everything is grandfathered in, is just not productive, number one, and it's not feasible either. So I certainly am willing to compromise. As you can tell, I'm open-minded enough. I try to communicate with everybody the best I can. I'm an advocate of agree to disagree, as Chief Jones said. So it's healthy conversation, and I think everybody knows what we're trying to do. But will there be some bystanders? Absolutely. But we're promising them they're not going to walk away with any less pay. Again, I will remind you that with doing nothing doesn't do anything either, because we are still we have a problem out there with this earning potential issue. We have employees that will not get a benefit that other employees are getting if we just do nothing right now. Shelley?
I have Shelley with her hand up.
Just piggybacking on what Chris just said, I think what we're doing is kicking the can down the road. I understand that we're going to have some people upset possibly right now, but down the road, we're going to have some people upset that have the same criteria, same degree, same education, and they're going to look at these other people, because they all know what each other makes. And the question they're going to be asking is, why are they getting more than me? You know, on paper, we look the same, but suddenly they're worth more than I am. So,
the summer of 2018, we gave back the people that lost 2.5%. Like let's make real clear that everybody is making the same amount of money that they're supposed to. Some of your employees, for about 10 years, you were quote unquote underpaid because you got screwed in a promotion a long time ago. We fixed that in 2018. So I don't want anybody to get it twisted that we're shorting somebody money. If anything, we've made them right in the last couple of years. We just didn't make them right the best way we could have, if that makes sense.
Okay, good dialogue. We need to move on though. Okay, do we need to vote on this or just
Move to
vote-
defer.
vote to defer? Or what about the second one, the ordinance amending the personnel rules regarding promotions, demotions, and transfers? Are we going to talk about that separately?
So this one's actually going to be an easier one. It's a longer policy, but I'll just give you guys the cliff
All
notes.
right, wait a minute,
We don't-
Chris, because we have to vote on to defer this.
Yeah.
Do I hear a motion to defer?
Motion to defer.
Second,
Okay.
second,
Okay, Alderman Waters.
second,
Okay, but we have to vote now. Roll call. Alderman Waters to defer?
defer,
None. Okay. Alderman Woodcock?
Aye.
Okay, and the chairman votes yes. Okay, so we're going to defer that. Okay, the next ordinance, does this one have a number, Robert?
It is 2020-1313.
Okay. And this is the ordinance amending the personnel rules regarding promotions, demotions, and transfers. Who do you want to, Chris, you want to open it up?
Yeah, and this one's actually going to be a lot quicker than the other one. I think we all agree. So the biggest issue we have, basically this policy goes into much more detail on promotions, demotions, and transfers. Right now, we have maybe a paragraph in our rules and regulations that address promotion pay rate. That's absolutely it. Everything else is up to discretion. All this policy is basically taking our practices. We've researched what other places are doing. Peter was very involved in putting some ideas together with this. At the end of the day, demotions are the only thing that this is really addressing that is substantial. I think everybody in this city, or at least on this screen, would agree that historically our demotion policy, where an employee can take a voluntary demotion and only get a 2.5% decrease, we've had people take advantage of that. If you take a voluntary demotion, it ought to sting a little bit more. I think that's reasonable. We've seen some instances where employees try to take advantage of our demotion policy or transfer policy. I know we've got issues. If you've been let's just say, for example, if you've been a police officer for 5 or 6 years and you're 5 or 6 steps up on the pay scale, our old policy suggests that you can just go be a firefighter making the exact same money and you don't really have to do anything. Well, how big of an issue will that cause the fire department, for instance, if that happens and a police officer transfers making more money than a lot of those guys that have worked there for 3 or 4 or 5 years? So long story short, this is really more addressing the demotions and transfer practices that we've been following. It basically gives the department heads a little bit more flexibility with pay rates. If one of your employees wants to take a demotion, it's going to hurt a lot more than 2.5%. We're going to work with that employee, but we don't want to cause morale and equity issues all throughout the city or your department, all because you have an employee that can't do their job and they're trying to take advantage of a 2.5% pay decrease. For instance, if Robert Manning right now, with our current demotion policy, wants to go be the admin clerk and answer phones in front of the HR office, are we really going to let Robert Manning take a 2.5% pay decrease to do that? Like it's almost laughable. Kind of what our policy states currently. So long story short, this one's really just to beef up some reasonable practices, give the department heads a little bit more flexibility with negotiating pay rates. It doesn't lock us into anything specifically. And then last but not least, within this policy, it beefs up our, and I don't want to scare anybody with this because this was actually done well before this coronavirus, but it actually beefs up our layoff and separation policy. This is something that we've talked about over the last couple of years because our current layoff policy basically says it's by seniority, and I think the tiebreaker is birthday. Long story short, I think we all agree that it needs to be a little bit more involved than that if we get to the point that we have to lay somebody off. We need to go off performance. We need to go off evaluations, things like that when it comes to laying off people, as well as seniority. That comes into play a little bit too. So long story short, Shelley, if you've got anything to add on this one specifically, but I don't think this one's going to be much of a debate at all. Scotty, Chief Jones, if you guys have been around long enough to know this one, I feel like everybody's probably going to support this one. So,
yeah, I would say 100% what Chris is saying. I've got a guy that self-demoted from fire prevention working a 40-hour work week back to suppression, he only lost 2.5%. So he had to go back to a senior firefighter to do that. So now he's up for promotion for captain. If he was to get promoted from captain, he'd get a 7.5% boost, and he'd be making about what a 8, 9, 10-year captain would be making, because that's just the way the rules and regs stated. And for, I guess, to simplify it, if a division chief retired and I wanted to self-demote myself, I could self-demote myself to division chief, and I would only lose 2.5%. And then I would be sitting there as a division chief. I'm not going to do that. I'm just saying, if I was one of those type people that did that rule by the letter of the rule, that's what happened. So I 100% behind this. I agree with Chris. It just creates issues.
Okay, my question again, do we have the blessing of MTS for this, Robert and Chris?
Well, I would answer that and tell you that Peter Voss now works for MTS, and he would be my contact. And I can tell you that nothing I've pitched to you guys is outside. Like, every one of these is what Peter supported. Peter just couldn't get any traction at the time. Didn't really have the motivation to try to push them through, because, as you guys have seen, these are controversial.
Okay, I want their blessing on this, though.
Oh, I've talked to both of them yesterday. Peter and Gary Jekyll, both of them support this.
Good.
100%.
Oh, they do? Okay, all right. Committee, my committee have anything? Where'd my committee go?
Well, Matt, I'm here.
There's part of my committee.
I'm like you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to have something in writing. Not that I dispute Chris, Lord, I wouldn't do that. But I'd like to know where they stand as far as MTS on something like this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Madam
Okay,
Chairman, if I could say something. I would just like to point out that the ordinance that was prepared, not all the verbiage that was in the agenda that went out, the actual ordinance that was sent to you today only deals with the promotion aspect, which is not controversial at all, I don't think, but it does not talk about the demotion thing and the transfer thing, which are really the more important matters that Chris was talking about. Those are big deals because of the way they've been done in the past. I would just like to point out that as the rules are currently written, the department head and the mayor had to approve those transfers. And we had a situation where we had someone that wanted to transfer that voluntarily took a whole lot more than 2.5%, because that's the only way the department head would allow him to. So I agree these changes need to be made to make it clear that this is something that's not automatic, the 2.5%, because of the inequity that Chris has talked about. That's going to follow this with a resolution changing the personnel rules, because that's where that verbiage is now. But this ordinance before you tonight is not controversial at all, I don't believe.
And this is going to go through before the general committee too?
Yes, ma'am. They'll consider this one also. And at that time, they will probably also have the resolution that goes with it about those other things Mr. Taylor's talking about demotions.
Okay, Dave?
No, I support this, because I've watched and listened and seen what's going on. And I think in talking to Gary Jekyll, and we can get it in writing, that's not a problem. But I think that these things, we've seen this happen more than once here recently, that people were demoted, took a demotion and 2.5%, and then they turned around. And I will tell you 100%, and some of the department heads that are sitting on this meeting will know this. We've got 3, 4, maybe 5 people in City Hall that are getting ready to file a grievance because they're getting paid less than these other people that came from another department, got demoted 2.5%. They're making more than they are in the same classification. They've been here 10 years. So this has caused all kinds of problems across the board. And we're just trying to rectify moving forward. Again, some of these things have been in place for 50 years since the city's been a city. Chris and Shelley and Alicia trying to clean these things up. And I agree 100% they need to be cleaned up. So I'll do whatever I can to help them.
All right, committee, we ready to vote on this? Because we're running out of time. This is going to go through before the general committee too, so.
I'm ready.
Okay. Do I hear a motion though for ordinance 2020-13? Do I hear a motion for that?
Move to approve.
Okay.
I second.
Okay. Okay, roll call, Alderman Waters?
That's second. I agree.
Yes. Alderman Woodcock?
Aye.
Okay. And Alderman Cunningham says aye too. So that was unanimous. Okay, hopefully we'll have enough time. Ordinance 2020-09, Ordinance transferring $3,750 from hockey feasibility study to dog park renovations. Do I hear a motion?
Ooh.
Motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Jamie, sit down. No discussion.
Okay. Okay, roll call, all in favor of ordinance 2020-09, Alderman Waters?
So move.
Yes, just say yes.
Yes.
Alderman Woodcock?
Aye.
Okay, and the chairman says aye. Okay, that one passed unanimously. Okay, ordinance 2020-10, ordinance amending budget ordinance 2019-22 by appropriating $568,000 to the State Street Aid line item maintenance streets. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Second.
Okay, discussion. I had asked Robert to give me a list of the streets and the amount that would cover. Robert, you have that ready? You're on mute.
Robert.
After our conversation, I apologize. Let me see if I can get that up to you.
Okay.
I apologize.
It's 2020-10. It's the State Street Aid funds.
I will share my screen.
Hey, while he's doing that, can I make one comment to Chris, please?
Excuse me?
I said, while he's doing that, can I make a comment to Chris, please?
About this State Street Aid?
No, back to the very first ordinance that he brought
Okay.
up.
No.
Okay, well, we're about to run out of time, Scotty. Let me get back to you real quick, because I had asked for a list of Glenbrook Way, Laverne Circle, and it says already completed paving projects. I had asked, we're out of time, I think. Oh, there we are.
This is all, this is what went before the Public Works Committee recently. This is what was provided for this particular, this particular ordinance regarding the projects involved from Glenway, Glenbrook, and Adjourned. But as for projects that have already been completed, my understanding is that is only in reference to the current year's budget and the activity that they have.
Okay, so you have 90,000 on the State Street, on the paving for Laverne for paving, right? That's coming out of State Street Aid, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
And 250,000 is coming out of stormwater.
I'm not sure if Marshall's on the call that would like to elaborate on that a little bit, but I
can talk on that if I need to, if Marshall's not on the call.
Yeah, go ahead, Daryl.
So this is a project that went before Public Works last year. It involves an industrial area.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, that has a lot of drainage issues. So yes, the bulk of the money is coming from stormwater.
Okay.
With, I think 90,000 coming from the State Street Aid paving fund that we're talking
Okay,
about.
great.
Madam
Okay,
Chairman,
that's the
correct.
number one. Okay, the next one is the Glenbrook.
Marshall has joined.
So is that an additional 234,000 for that we don't have for Glenbrook Way?
No, we do have 200,000 in escrow currently.
Okay, so we need 34,000 for that, right?
Madam Chairman, that was approved last year by Public Works, and it rolled over this year. We had a special vote for it recently to do Laverne Circle and Glenbrook the other day.
Yeah, I remember the Glenbrook Way. Okay, the pavers, and then 176,000 coming out of State Street Aid, right?
Marshall, can you help me out there?
Yeah. I just wanted to chime in real fast. The 234. I just want to, I guess, reiterate this as an maybe already been said. These are estimates, and when we do these estimates, we try to be conservative, meaning we're hoping they're high, and when we actually complete the work, they come in under what we estimated. And so our goal, obviously, for the escrow and the removal of the brick pavers, is to get at or below the $200,000. And when we started that work, there were a lot of unknowns that we just were unsure about some of the some of the circumstances regarding this paver. So we estimated high. We should know by the end of this week, next week, kind of where that's going to hit. But obviously our goal is to get as close or below 200 if possible. I put that in there because that was in fact the estimate, but we hopefully will be under that.
We have 5 minutes left here in the meeting.
Yeah. So and the remaining paving in Glenbrook, of course, is the 176. That's for the remaining portions from New Shackle to Andrews Run. And it just when we can do that, we'll have a kind of one stretch of Glenbrook Way. It'll be entirely paved.
So how much is it? Okay, out of the 568,000, how much is the Glenbrook project costing us in State Street aid?
It'll be a little over 200,000.
Plus the 200,000 that we have in escrow.
Right. Well, the total it'll be the 234 plus the 176.
Okay, that's okay. Less the 200,000 that we have in escrow, right?
Right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to have clear in my head. And then this last amount, it says $152,935. I mean, it says after completing, it says paying final invoices.
We've completed, obviously we've done some paving work on Old Shackle and some other streets in the city, and we haven't paid those yet. It's work that's been done, but the invoice, we haven't received the actual invoices to be able to pay it. And so we anticipate those in the coming weeks, and there'll be a portion of that we'll all of it. We'll have to pay, pay that.
Is that normal that we budget for it after the work is done? I mean, that sounds backwards to me.
Well, no, you have to remember, we still had, when I started this process, we still had $1 million in supplemental paving.
Okay.
And so, knowing that, I've of course got with Dave and we agreed to move forward with this last group of paving projects. But then, after the fact, I went back and realized that we had money from a previous year State Street aid that I could utilize. And so I then making this effort to try to use all that money and then leave alone, the money we have in supplemental paving.
Okay. Okay. That's what I needed to know. I just needed to see a breakdown of where the 568,000 was going to.
Sure.
Okay. That's all I had. Committee? Where's my committee?
Here you go. I'm here.
I'm right here.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Alderman Waters,
Aye.
Alderman Woodcock,
Aye.
and Alderman Cunningham says aye. Okay, so that was recommended unanimously. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting through quick here. Okay, the last thing on the agenda is a resolution to apply for United States Tennis Association. Did I skip anything? No. Resolution 2020-20, resolution to apply for United States Tennis Association grant. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call. Alderman Waters,
Aye.
Alderman Woodcock,
Aye.
and Alderman Cunningham, aye. Okay, that passed, recommended unanimously. All right, the other business, do we have time to even cover any of this?
I do not believe so.
Robert?
I do not believe so, but I believe you all have in your packet there for
Okay.
the sales tax.
All right. Well, looks like that's still okay for now. Committee, do you have anything for Robert?
Just, Madam Chairman, the hotel tax is sure taking a beating, isn't it?
Oh.
About half, but this month that we're reporting here, we do not have activity for last year to compare, but my assumption is it would have been around 30,000. So I would say that's half of what we would have normally seen.
Yeah, I agree. That's all I have.
Sad. Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
committee. Thank you, everybody.